Hi there, and today I'm going to do a survey assessment. So this is where I go through a real survey report and just talk about it and see what's going on, make some comments if there are any, and just help interpret the report. So let's get into it, and here we are. So uh, this is for 6 Chesterton Grove, and I can see off the bat it's a 1930s house or whatever, but whenever I do my general assessments of properties, I guess the age and do all of that. But really, all I'm interested in today is working out what the survey is saying and whether it's a good or a bad thing or whatever. And to do this, I'm going to add some comments, so therefore I'll be able to just do some stuff. So, okay, let's go. And that's good news. So the guy says that it's a reasonable purchase. It would be bad if it wasn't. So he's happy with the resaleability. I have seen some surveys which say that wasn't a reasonable purchase, but this one's reading okay. So let's carry on. And it then just goes through some stuff. Now, whenever the report highlights these kind of things like main walls and whatever, uh, and heating and water heating and so on, a lot of this is down to certificates not being available. If they had all the certificates in a folder when they turned up at the property, then they would probably not sign this off as urgent attention. There are a few things I'm slightly concerned about: main walls, floors, this stuff here, D4, E3, E4. So let's just see what they have to say. And 30 to 35, fine. And now that's quite interesting. So this ties in with an idea that a lot of houses were renovated extensively in the 70s. And I think this was driven to a large extent by changing building regulations. So I've been doing some research on this, and 1960s was a transformative period for the quality of buildings. 1950s houses were decent, and 30s houses were solid as well. But everything pre World War One, it's okay. But anyway, let's have a look. So EPCD, fine. And carrying on, driveway. So I'm just very curious about the issues that they talk about. So the chimneys, great, no major issues, good. And we can see the chimneys are capped as well, which is a good thing. It just means water doesn't seep down into the building unnecessarily. And he's talking about roof coverings and that. Oops. Yes, the roof has been recovered in the past and generally appears to, yes. So this is good. We'll have a look in a minute as to what's going on. Now, there might be a couple of loose slates. And the reason I say that is if you look here, you can see something going on here. Anyway, he's talking about front bay roof, modern membrane lining, great. And 15 to 20 years, that's really good. So modern membrane lining is probably one of those rubberized linings, which are really good. And we have them on our conservatory, or we have I don't know what you call it, but anyway, we have this rubberized stuff for flat roofed areas on our house. And there we have the extension, and we've got the flashing, which looks relatively modern. So that's also good. And UPVC fascias, great. That's really great. They will not cause problems. They'll just do their thing for a very long time, unlike wooden fascias, which obviously rot. Now let's have a look. Main cavity wall. So he's just talking about the wall ties, and surveys like this usually talk about wall tie corrosion, i.e., you've got a cavity wall, so you've got two walls and you've got bits of metal holding the two walls together. And if the metal deteriorates, then in theory, the whole wall could just go like that. So if you have a gable end wall, so you've got a roof and then you've got the triangular wall bit here and the cable ties go, this whole wall is nothing to fix on and therefore it could go plop. But the thing with this house, and the reason it's not an issue in my opinion, is because of its structure. So it doesn't have a gable end, it's got the hipped roof, so you don't have any like non-structural thing flying around in the wind. And also, it's effectively a box, well, a three-sided box, because you've got a separate, well, four-sided rectangle, but because it's got joins, as it were, the whole thing is fundamentally quite strong. And I would be very surprised if there was any real issue with cable tie structures or whatever. So my view, it's fine. I don't see it as an issue. And if lenders do see that as an issue, they're going to say, can we have a cable, not a cable tie, but a wall tie survey, which you can do. And essentially that's where they drill a hole into the wall, stick a probe in, and then look around inside the wall just to work out what's going on. I.e., look at the cable tie, look at the two wall ties and just see if they're okay or not. It's unlikely that you'd be asked for this. I haven't seen this requested on any property except for one property from Gatehouse Bank who wanted to see this. But overall, I don't think it's a major issue. There's a wall tie there, an old one and a new one. And because of the age of this property, it wouldn't be galvanized metal, so therefore it is prone to rusting. However, it turns out that if you have cavity wall insulation, early cavity wall insulation, you get a lot of condensation building up between the walls because the walls can't really breathe. And that's when cavity wall ties go. But anyway, I move on, and we've got some nice glazing, dark. I don't know if it's painted. I assume it's been overpainted. And anyway, so that all looks okay. Nice outside door, nice and modern. And now they're talking about the conservatory. A nice feature, quite a large one as well, but as ever with conservatories, they're hot in the summer, they're cold in the winter, and they're just not very thermally efficient. But it's good extra space, so that's good. And the joinery is good. Nice. It's good when things are good. And let's move on here. So the roof structure, he's saying it's 2. So now this is quite interesting for me anyway. And it is that this roof doesn't have any lining. So I would have expected it to have been re-roofed, and it might well have been, but usually you get a felt lining or some sort of waterproof breathable membrane underneath, and the idea is if a slate cracks, the water then hits the membrane and then goes. So you've got a barrier, protection barrier, but you don't have this. So, okay, that's a bit negative, but the roof seems to be in good condition. So I don't know if it's been re-roofed, but as a general rule of thumb, if the roof has survived this long, then it should be okay. Generally, if it's a bad roof, like the slate has too many impurities, then just me getting nerdy with slates, what happens with slates are that if they have impurities in them, certain types of impurity, then the rain, which in industrial areas will have a little bit of acid, the rain then effectively erodes the slate, and then the slates get crumbly and then they fall off, and it's just issues. And if it's really solid Welsh slate, for example, which this looks like it would be because it's very purple, then generally it's very high quality slate, very few impurities, and is pretty resistant to just about anything. So if the roof survived this far, it's going to survive a long time further, I would say. And okay, so he's saying plaster and lath ceiling, that's not good. Whoops. That's not good. However, I think it looks okay. And broadly speaking, yeah, you see, this I don't really understand. Unless he looked under the insulation in the loft. So I'll show you what I mean. So you've got a loft insulation here. You could just pull some of that up and have a look and see what the thing is made of. But I'm very sensitive about bad finishes, because if you have lath and plaster and it needs to come off, you really just have to more or less destroy the house. Like, it's so messy and so unpleasant that if I ever see it, I generally just say, well, avoid. But this all looks very tidy, and also this is not original coving. So it may be plaster and lath. Certainly this only came through in the 50s. So maybe it's the original surfaces, but it's certainly an awful lot better than the kind of surfaces that I would have seen in older buildings from say 1800 or 1900, say 1880 through to 1915 or 1914. So I'm kind of like, okay, so that's a question. And then he's talking about he's basically asking, do they have building regs permission or approvals on this? But he's not saying there are any critical issues here. There aren't any like massive cracks or anything like this. So this is a fairly typical thing where a house gets remodeled and then here we are, the remodeling, but like, where's the building regulation certification and all that? And he's saying, I can't see any, therefore I'm going to give it a 3. But overall, I think the finish of this house looks reasonable, and I don't know, maybe it is lath and plaster. I suppose it probably is, but I think it's a reasonably well done finish from what I can see. Now, here are some damp tests, and this is a little bit high, but you kind of expect this actually. I'm not too concerned about rising damp with this kind of property, mainly because they had early forms of damp-proof membrane, and it was usually a bitumen, like a layer of bitumen on the foundation bricks, and it was certainly a lot better than damp proofing pre World War One. All right, and he couldn't access anything, so he's saying because he can't see, he doesn't know, and therefore he's saying because he can't see the subfloor timbers and there was some damp on the ground, so he's just saying you've got to have a closer look. But this is the kind of stuff that you get in a lot of survey reports. It's like, if I can't see it, therefore I've got to say it's really bad until you get a feedback or get another test to say it's okay. And here we are, more photographs. These are stock photographs. This is not a rotting joist for this property. And then moving on, and heating, you got a solid fuel burner thing here. Nice kitchen, induction, brand new kitchen, and quite nicely specified actually. So that's good. And I think it's nicely decorated. I don't know what's going on here. Um, that's weird and needs cleaning. So there will be a little bit of painting and decorating on this house, but there's nothing significant to talk about here. He's happy with the bathroom. They've obviously gone through quite a lot of modernization because the this bathroom is probably a £4,000, £5,000 renovation. The kitchen is probably £7,000 or £8,000. So they've definitely spent on this house. And so overall, it's shaping up quite nicely, I would say. One thing though, the surveyor isn't looking for how the property looks, and to ultimately understand where you're at with renovations, it's important to get a visit and just see what's going on. Now, on the electricity stuff, it's the usual thing about getting certificates, and he's got is fitted with circuit breakers. Good. That means that it doesn't need attention, most likely. So that's good. Needs an electricity certificate, but having circuit breakers and all of that in situ, nice. All right, and we've got gas, but no certificates. Then we've got water, but he doesn't know if there's any lead or whatever. So it's the usual. And central heating, reasonably modern boiler actually, very modern boiler. And that just fits in with the narrative that they spent a lot of money renovating parts of the house. Anyway, water, drainage, and fine. All right, so that's either a half drainage hatch or it's a drainage hatch under a fence. I don't know which. Does he say? He couldn't get in and see, and he couldn't find any drainage. So often with these surveys, or generally, should I say, with these surveys, they find the drainage hatch, open it up, have a look inside, take a photograph. And then we're on to other, which is fine. All looks fine in the back there. And legal stuff. And other risks and hazards. So what's the valuation? So it's 240,000. And let's just go and find out what the offer was. I'm quite curious. So 240,000 and 197. Now, one question I got from somebody recently was, what if the reinstatement value is lower than the value of the property? Well, the difference is effectively the value of the land, if you think about it. So in building that property, 200,000, to build it in a similar way to the existing property, and thus, by that definition, the land is worth £40,000. So it's like that extra premium is just simply the premium you pay for the location. And in respect to the valuation, so they have some comparables here, which they talk about, and we have access to the same kind of information they do, which is interesting. So if they're off with, if they come back with like comparables that are just weird, then with this information we can go and have a look around and just see what we can see. So so that is more or less that. I'm going to just pause. And I'm back. So the offer price was 255 that was accepted on this. And as I say, they've done their comparables. I'm going to ask Martin to review this because I'm quite curious to see what he says. As a general rule, surveyors are quite conservative, and they tend to look at historic references. So, for example, um, they he's using nationwide house price index, which is okay, I suppose, not great. And he's saying uh, that, yeah, with the defects and all of that, 240. I The reason I take some issue with this is because um, in a very hot market like this, where this property is situated, which is Droylsden, I think, the market is just so crazy around here that um, what happens is that the market keeps rising, and the land registry information lags typically by 6 months. And therefore, what happens is that you also have surveyors who are relatively conservative, so they're not going to put huge valuation numbers on properties, because the last time round in 2008 they got caught out because they were saying, yeah, it's worth this, and then market slides and they get caught out because they get accused of being overvaluing or of overvaluing property. So it's a funny old one. Um, I think we need to just look at this in more detail, but it's not really the final say. So what really matters now is the survey, the valuation survey. And so the process with these kind of things, for anyone looking at this in the future, is that you got your bid price, you got the surveyor saying it's worth this, so we've got this as an asset. And then there'll be a mortgage application, and then there'll be a mortgage survey, and they'll come back and they'll say, well, we think it's worth X. Now, if they also say they think it's worth 240,000, by the time we get the mortgage survey in, there's a very high chance that the vendor will negotiate. And if they do that, then great. So what that means is we'll just go to the negotiation table and say, right, we're overpaying by 15,000. How can we deal with this? And I would say about half the time to 2/3 of the time when we do negotiations, well, 80% of the time we get something back. We can chip the price a bit if we get a mortgage valuation that's downvalued. And about half the time we get a meaningful discount, or not discount, but a meaningful reduction of the price. So we'll just find out when the mortgage valuation comes in. But overall, it's a tidy property. The lath and plaster issue isn't such an issue because I think the property is in good condition. And I know that the surveyor talks about certain condition issues, but maybe I'm just totally missing something, but I'm not really seeing any significant condition issues that would really concern me. So anyway, there it is. I hope that's helpful, and yeah, there we are. All right, thank you. Oh, sorry, techie issues. Bye.